Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for Clutch Points, joined on this fine Sunday evening-ish, my time, early evening for those of you watching on the West Coast, by nobody. I am joined by absolutely nobody. It is just me here in this office, and I am joined, well, frankly, I'm joined by you guys. You guys are going to be running the back half of the show here, or most of the show, frankly. I just have some thoughts coming off of the Lakers' big weekend. They beat the Spurs. I was in the house for that one. And then they beat the New Orleans Pelicans. And I have some thoughts about both of those games and some of the participants in them. But yeah, it was a great weekend there for the Lakers. It was an important weekend there for the Lakers. As they took down the two winnable games that you need to win in order to rack them up over the course of the season and stay in or ahead of that playoff chase. So we'll talk about that. And then it's Sunday, which means it's a mailbag episode. So I have a question from iTunes. I have some questions from the Discord. I have some questions from Twitter. I have some questions from Blue Sky, and then I'm obviously going to be getting questions from you here live in the lounge. Speaking of being here live in the lounge, please do hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching right now. If you're watching on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@LakersLounge is where you can find the show there. And then if you guys are here in YouTube, please hit that like button. That moves us a little further up in Al Gore's rhythm. So that will help there as well. But without any further ado, because this is going to be a loaded show, I'm going to dive on in. So over the weekend, the Lakers beat the San Antonio Spurs 120-115, and then the New Orleans Pelicans 104-99. The scores would indicate that neither game was particularly overwhelming, that neither win was particularly overwhelming, which, like, if you really want to nitpick there, like, you can say, hey, you kind of sort of need to overwhelm a team that has the record that the Spurs do. You kind of need to beat, the New Orleans Pelicans a little bit more handily, given how many injuries. Like, half of their rotation is out. So I could understand, like, if you want to be doom and gloom, that those games might point to some real concerns there. And I think there are some concerns here with the Lakers. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because every time I get a little too happy about the state of the Lakers, shit happens. So I'm going to, for the sake of everybody listening, and for the sake of the Lakers, and for the sake of the Lakers fan base, I am going to kind of temper expectations here, or temper the reaction to this big weekend a little bit, not too much though, because as I asked Anthony Davis on was it Friday night? It is important, I think, that they are undefeated since D'Angelo Russell went to the bench. I'm going to write about that for Clutch Points, and some of what I've heard, regarding D'Angelo Russell coming off of the bench and the way that the Lakers have looked since. So you will have that to kind of look at and look forward to. And I just think overall, like, Dalton Connect looks legit. Max Christie took a big step forward in kind of resetting his season over the weekend. Gabe Vincent even played well. That's great to see too. Now, the Lakers did not have Rui over the weekend, and he has an ankle thing that's bothering him. Anthony Davis's eye doesn't seem to be getting any better. In fact, like, I was there with people who follow the Lakers around, and even people close to the Lakers were like, yeah, it's a little weird. His eye seems to be getting worse. His eye seems to look worse now than the night that he got dinged up in the first place. So we'll talk about all of that stuff here over the course of the show. But I do want to start with that game Friday night in San Antonio that I was in attendance for. So first off, want to thank the Spurs and the Lakers for accommodating me. And shouts to Clutch Points. My dude Tomer of Clutch Points did a lot of work to um, see that I was able to make the game. Had a lot of fun doing it. Missed doing that kind of stuff, and it was great to be able to be there in attendance for it. Shouts to Jovan, because I probably bugged him. I have never been to the Frostbank Arena there in San Antonio, let alone traversing the tunnels within Frostbank Arena. That whole thing is a maze down there. All of the turns and all that stuff, and the hallways all look the same. So I got my steps in that day, is what I'll say. But Jovan was great. He let me kind of follow him around while I was just kind of looking for where to go. Again, the Lakers made a ton of room for me wherever I needed, whatever I asked for, or whatever. I didn't even ask for anything, but like in terms of like the setting for JJ's interviews, for the locker room interviews, like it was a good experience, and I think it was I learned a lot, honestly, about the Lakers in all of that. So I actually want to start there as far as like what I learned being there for that game, and like my brief look into the Lakers kind of behind the scenes, rather than just kind of relying on people who are close to those scenes. First and foremost, this team like does legitimately enjoy being around each other. Really got that sense. LeBron, Austin, and AD in particular have great chemistry that you can see on the court, but then you can, really carries over into the locker room and to their interactions, thereof. One example is the term "ooter," which the beat reporters were all trying to figure out like when that started. I guess it was like a few weeks back when AD went nuts from 3-point range, and the term "ooter" is like reserved for the best shooter on the team. Obviously, AD has been on a tear by his expectations, but relatively speaking, for AD from deep. Austin had a really funny comment after the game where he was like, "Yeah, we've been begging this dude to shoot, and it's about fucking time that he finally is." There's a great line there from Austin. And so AD was talking about his shooting after the game, and he was talking about how he's the best ooter on the team. LeBron, or not LeBron, but Austin was walking by when that happened, and he just kind of like laughed it off and was giving AD a hard time. And then while Austin was giving his post-game interview, AD was giving him a hard time from beyond the scrum. All the while, LeBron is kind of laughing at all of it too. So like that trio really seems to have real chemistry, really seems to. And by the way, like, I don't know if you would have the level of success that they have late in games running those stack, set pieces and all of the pick and roll stuff and the DHO stuff that those guys run. I don't think you would have that kind of those results if not for that great chemistry. And it just really kind of jumped off of the court, and it really, really was hammered home when I was there in the locker room watching those guys interact. I also got the sense that, when Gabe knocked down a big shot in San Antonio, the guys went nuts because they know how hard he's working defensively, even though he isn't knocking down his shots. And that's something that I think veteran players and players with winning in mind really seem to appreciate. And then when Gabe knocked down that shot late in the game, the bench went nuts, and something. And then further along those lines, JJ Redick actually started. Now, he was asked a question about Max, which helps, but JJ did kind of wax poetic about Max, staying patient and staying focused when he fell out of the rotation, and then jumping back into that rotation out of necessity and immediately having an impact. His shot has been more up and down, obviously, than we would maybe hope, which is obviously frustrating. But I look at the situation and kind of what the Lakers need of him, and I was really kind of impressed with JJ's response when he was asked about Max, and I think the way that it extended to how various guys have waited patiently if they fall out of the rotation, or if they started the season not as big a part of the rotation as maybe they would have liked, or as guys maybe took a step back in that rotation with the roles that they're playing. And it was something that like AD talked about. I grabbed that clip here. It's on the YouTube page, but I'm going to go ahead and play it here as well. This was AD talking about, about that professionalism that's kind of become, I think, a foundational cornerstone of the Lakers locker room and the guys playing for the team. You guys are 4-0 since D'Lo was moved to the bench. How important is it to have success when that kind of a change is implemented?
I mean, it's just about everyone trusting the process, accepting the roles. D'Lo didn't have any, fight back. He's still coming out producing. So, obviously, very professional of him, professional of Cam. But it just speaks volumes of our unit, how we're, together, and no one cares about, if they're starting, if they're finishing games coming off the bench, like whatever, as long as we just win.
And that winning matters, right? The winning that AD talked about there at the end really matters. I said it with Russell Westbrook. I've said it, with other teams around the league when they make these big moves to get a guy who is good enough to start on most teams. D'Lo, I would say he's a league average starter. Some nights he looks better than that. Some nights he looks worse than that. And I think you come out, in aggregate, and I would say that D'Lo is a league average starter, which means he should be starting on most teams. And, he's coming off of the bench, and JJ Redick moved him to the bench. And again, I saw some people in the comments, telling me that I'm kind of, I don't know, propagandizing the move to the bench by saying that it isn't a demotion. I like, he has more responsibilities with that second unit than he does with the starting group. So yes, like by definition, now that he isn't starting games and he doesn't really close too many games, like his role on this team is less than it was last year, but it's still a critical role. The stuff that D'Angelo Russell is doing for this team is still really effing important. And the Lakers as a group, as a team, are significantly better, or have looked, I don't know about significantly, because of the teams that they've beaten. But the Lakers make a lot more sense. And their starting group and their bench unit is a lot more balanced now that D'Lo is down there with those running those second units. And you heard AD talk about how, D'Lo didn't like hang his head or mope or anything like that. I think I saw a little bit of moping from D'Lo initially, and I think occasionally there are going to be some frustrations that bubble to the surface there, which, by the way, is perfectly fine by me. That just indicates that D'Lo is competitive enough to want a bigger role on this team, cares enough about the Lakers to want a bigger role on this team. I'm fine with the occasional like eye roll, when he walks off of the court, when he feels like he has it going, or I'm fine with the occasional, quick clip that shows him there on the bench, just kind of staring off, with that million-mile stare. I'm fine with that stuff because at the end of the day, to me, the actions are what matter. Now, if we do start to see those frustrations seep into his focus level and his energy level on the court, well, then now we're having a very different discussion. But so far, I think he's executed that role very, very well. Lakers are 5-0 since he went there to the bench. And that I don't know if AD quite answered the question that I was hoping, or that I asked. I do think he gave important insight there, but that idea of being rewarded for good process allows you to stick with the process, right? Like if you when Frank Vogel benched Russell Westbrook at the end of a game of a couple games there, um, that was good process because Russell was killing the Lakers with his shot selection, with some bad turnovers, with those defensive lapses and stuff like that. He was hurting the Lakers. He was hurting the team. And to go from that then to you play in that game and you lose with that good process, the process doesn't matter as much to somebody like Russell Westbrook, who feels like he should always be on the court at the closing of games, who feels like he should always be starting, and to a locker room that, like, he had a lot of cachet in. That kind of stuff matters. And now the Lakers are being rewarded for good process. It's going to allow them to stick with that good process, and we'll see how long this thing moves forward. Now, the Lakers do have, you look at their schedule here. Utah is a winnable game. Orlando is another winnable game. Orlando hasn't looked quite as good as I thought they would coming out of the gates. KCP hasn't been very good for them. Denver, Jokic has been in and out of the lineup recently, though I do believe he's supposed to be back by the time the Lakers play them a week from yesterday, next Saturday. So, I think you're looking at a team that I think is kind of starting to find that identity. They are starting to execute that system that JJ Redick has talked about a ton. And then at the ends of games, they look really effing good so long as Austin, LeBron, and AD are on the court. The combinations around them hasn't mattered so much because those sets that they're running have been damn near unguardable. So really fun stuff there from the Lakers over the weekend. Really important stuff too from over the weekend, and it was great. It was really fun to be there to watch it all take place. Also want to give a shout out to you guys, like, the response to me being, there, boots on the floor, and a number of times that I hear, whether it's in mentions, and I even got it some like at the arena, people saying that like they've been, listening or watching my stuff for years. That stuff does matter to me. That stuff, is really cool. And I always appreciate your guys' support. I never take it for granted, and it makes me only want to keep getting better. So, I'm negotiating with the boss, not necessarily with Clutch Points, but with Jen, about doing some travel when the Lakers come here to Texas for the rest of the season. So we'll see how those negotiations pan out. But the hope is for me to cover at least a few more games here whenever they come here to the state, and maybe over the years to come, as my kids start getting older and they're a little bit more self-sufficient, maybe I'll be able to do more of that there moving forward, but outside of the state of Texas and stuff like that too. So without any kind of further ado, let's I want to talk about Dalton Connect, who and Max also, because I think it's very the 2 points are very relative, or they have a lot in common with each other. So the role that I think makes the most sense for Dalton and for Max is a nice, narrow, you shoot when you're open. You have a couple dribbles if you want them, on the occasional possession, but your offense is mostly going to be created for you. And then on the defensive side, they're playing different roles there. Dalton is being hidden a lot more on the defensive side than Max is. So that's where the two roles differ. I do think that Max is he needs to play more physically. Like I think he's gotten a brutal whistle to the start of the season. I understand why he would be reluctant to be as physical as maybe he should be because of that brutal whistle. But he still needs to, like, there were a couple plays where he got pushed under the basket or moved under the basket, on a box out. There have been some screens that he dies on or some post ups and stuff where he gets moved a little too easily. That stuff needs to improve. But I think like the two of them getting better almost at the same time tells me that, the coaching staff kind of pulled them aside and said, guys, stop overthinking this. Like, this is what you're expected on offense, and this is what you're expected on defense. And those are like, and they're very similar roles. You guys can do them at the same time. You just stand in opposite corners on offense. The occasional cuts from the both of you are going to look very similar on offense. The types of shots. Now, Dalton is going to have more stuff run for him, obviously, than Max. And that's where, if you really want to get into the weeds, where those roles are going to differ. But that idea of narrowing the focus for those two guys so that they can be better in those roles, better identify what's expected of them in those roles, and then better execute those roles when they're out there. That's why I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that both guys seem to look a lot better, and that improvement happened at roughly the same time. Now, what that means moving forward for the rotation is obviously really interesting. Cam has kind of taken a back seat as Max has looked better and as Dalton has looked better. I think Max will kind of fall back into further down the rotation. I say Cam there, right? Cam will move further down the rotation now that Max and Dalton are executing those roles better. Gabe's spot, I do like what he provides defensively, but he does need to be a lot better offensively. So I do think that Dalton will get some of Gabe's minutes too. Now, I think Gabe will, like if Austin or D'Lo tweak something, that's when Gabe becomes more important because he needs somebody to run the offense. So like you can probably anticipate that potentially always being an option for Gabe. But I do think that like at this point, you look at Dalton's numbers, and it is really impressive. And this is for the season. Recently has been even better. But on the season, he's averaging 9 points a game. He is shooting 40% from 3-point range on 4.5 attempts per game. That number has gone up recently. I can even we'll do the last 5 games here for Dalton. But over the last 5 games, that number has jumped up. He's playing 25 minutes a game. He's averaging 13.5 points per game. He's shooting 50% from 3-point range on 5 attempts from 3. Small sample size, obviously, but still, I think it's noteworthy. He's averaging about 3.5 rebounds a game, and he's been in terms of plus minus, he has been a plus 10 over that time. And that's per game on average. So really, like coming into his own type stuff here from Dalton, who looks like an absolute, like, I wouldn't be surprised they do the rookie ladder every week. I think we're going to start seeing Dalton make his way up that rookie ladder. He has a lot of work to do to catch guys like Zach Edey and to catch guys like Risa Shea, who's been really good for Atlanta so far this season, and other guys, a little higher. But it's early, and Dalton is really helping the Lakers win. I think that's the most impressive thing to me. I'm going to look at his advanced numbers here and his on-off stuff, and it's really impressive what we've seen from Dalton, where normally rookies, like especially scoring forward rookies, their impact can be kind of overstated because the buckets are loud and some of the mistakes are quiet, but do hurt over time. But the Lakers are 6.5 points better per 100 possessions when he's on the court. And then they are, when he's off of the court, they're minus 5.3 points per. They're 5.3 points worse than their opponent over the course of 100 possessions per game. And like, to compare that to other guys on this roster, um, interestingly, D'Lo is actually, like, in terms of uh, what the team looks like when he's off of the court, they're 12 points worse than when he's off of the court, than their opponents over 100 possessions, per game. He is a plus 8.2 when he is on there. And again, like, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, like, he is really having his way with second units. And I think, you combine uh getting to a playing style that makes more sense for him, and he's now thriving in those units. And just inherently, second units have less talent on the court defensively than starting groups do. And I think D'Lo has really done a lot in those minutes to handle those minutes and be as impactful as he's been. But for a rookie in Dalton Connect to have that kind of a swing, his on-off swing like that is you basically add 6.5 and minus 5.5, which gets you to almost 11-point swings when he's his on-off is almost 11 points. That's pretty impressive for a rookie so early in the season. And I think he deserves a lot of credit. I think the Lakers deserve a lot of credit for finding a role that makes the most sense for him, staying patient while he was missing makeable shots, and now those that patience is paying its dividends. So shouts to Max and shouts to Dalton, who both look a lot more like the players that the Lakers were hoping for at the beginning of the season. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some of these questions here. The first one comes from iTunes as a 5-star review from Lakers Fedora, who writes, "Been a follower of yours since the Locked On days. My loyalty has only grown deeper since your recent episode where you crowned stuffing as the most elite Thanksgiving side. This is a hot take I can stand beside." Is it even like a hot take? I feel like that's just that's like saying gravity is a thing. Like, stuffing is the best. In all seriousness, huge fan of your work and huge fan of the honesty you bring to the table as it pertains to the Lakers. I've never been one for sugarcoating, so I appreciate that you only sprinkle that in when necessary. Question here: why are people even trying to compare JJ bringing D'Lo off the bench to Ham doing the same? I get that the action is the same, but the circumstances aren't even close. JJ at least tried the Western Conference Finals lineup, then correctly arrived at let's bring D'Lo off of the bench. Ham started with Prince as opposed to Rui, then proceeded to compound that mistake by adding in Reddish into the starting lineup and continuing to start Prince. At one point, benching both D'Lo and Austin, starting literally 5 forwards. Actually, at one point he benched all 3 of D'Lo, Austin, and Rui, which in turn, if I'm not mistaken, turned you into the Joker. Pretty close. The Ham loyalists can't believe that's a thing. Trying to peddle him as a scapegoat are just exhausting. He sucked, and the roster also sucked. Both can be true. Appreciate the great work, and apologies for my lengthy comment. This very quickly into a therapy session for me. Hashtag this is why I'm losing my mind. You know what? I'll play that for you. This is why I look like this, everybody. This is why I'm losing my mind. So yeah, I obviously I agree with everything that was said there, and I really appreciate the kind words at the top. Look, I've been very consistent on this. The roster that the Lakers went into the last season, I was high-ish on, because we had just seen them in the Western Conference Finals, and we had just seen them rip through the Western Conference to get there. Now, they were swept in the Western Conference Finals, which would indicate to me that, like, it still wasn't quite good enough. So I was hoping to see some tweaks, but I understand where the Lakers were coming from, thinking that they would improve organically and internally by way of that continuity. Unfortunately, Darvin didn't get that memo, and right from the beginning of the season, and again, like, this is something I asked around about when I was there. It was like, yeah, like, what's the difference here? Like, what's the difference between what you're seeing now and how Ham executed the same idea, right? The same, kind of concept. And, the biggest thing that I got is the communication is so much better than it was with Ham, who I was told at one point that uh, at various points also, Darvin would walk in and the starters would be written on the whiteboard. And like, he'd walk in and then go like, "No," and he like wipe somebody's name off and he would write somebody else's name on there. And that just kind of like, I'm not going to call it lackadaisical. I'm not going to call it lazy, but it is like very eccentric, right? That just kind of, and it also kind of disrespects the name who was up there, who was going to start, and then now all of a sudden isn't. Especially like depending on how close it is to game time. If you spent your whole day prepping to start, and then now all of a sudden aren't, or if you're prepping to come off of the bench, and then now all of a sudden aren't, well then, like, your pregame routine and the way that you're approaching the game is just completely different. So, yeah, I tend to think that like the biggest difference here is the execution of the concept, and that is just as, if not more important, as we're seeing, um, as the concept itself. So, um, yeah, like it's a I understand looking at the same roster and seeing some of the same issues and being like, well, you guys can't pin all of the blame on Ham, which, like, yeah, you're right. I'm not. Like, I think he deserves the lion's share of the blame. I think he definitely deserved to be fired. But like this notion that like we're gonna go and rewrite history in order to make it look like scapegoating is just such an like lacks so much nuance that I can't quite arrive there with people. So yeah, great question, great comment, and I agree with with everything that you said. All right, let's dive into let's see. We have some super comments here, so I'm going to go ahead and play this. Wrong one. I'll play this one. All right, so the first question here comes from Brandon Oming, who writes, if Wood and Mando come back, what is your 9-man rotation? All right, so I saw some people making the case for, and this is, I think, another question later in the mailbag, so I'll go ahead and address it here. But the thought of, or the idea of basically starting Vando, moving Rui to the bench, and starting Connect in the shooting guard spot so that your starters would be Austin, Dalton, Vando, LeBron, and AD. And then you put Vando on the other team's best player, perimeter player, that is. I see where you're going there. I see what you're trying to cook up, and I like a lot of the elements about that meal. And it's tough because Rui has been so good offensively. His defense needs to be better than it has. I think there are some stretches where he's really focused, and normally it still tends to coincide with his involvement and success offensively. And I guess that, like, when we're talking about like the ebbs and the flows of that starting group, that I think has a lot to do with it. Here's a stat too that I think is cause for concern. LeBron and AD on the season are carrying a net rating together of negative 2.4. That's not great. Those guys, when they're on the court, you need to be better than your opponent. Now, we could talk about like, you know, uh, if it's improved. Let's look at the last 5 games. Um, Now, that number over the last 5 games has improved. It is now at 112.7 offensive, 112.2 defensive. So it's a point 0.5 net. That's a little bit better, but like obviously not where it needs. Like when LeBron and AD are on the court, you need to be overwhelming. Like or at least you need to be like quite a bit better. Now, they are going up against other elite duos whenever they're on the court together, right? The stretches of game that those guys are on the court tend to be when the other team's best duo is also on the court. So, there's some nuance involved there too. But I do think that like that defensive rating, that 112.2 defensive rating, um, and frankly the offensive rating too. Like if Rui is out there to help you offensively, then that unit, that front court of Rui, LeBron, and AD need to be really good offensively. And hell, like when you have Austin, Rui, D'Lo, and LeBron out there, I'll look at 4-man lineups too really quickly, just to see what we're looking at here. But on the season, LeBron, wow, that's kind of weird. That the most played, it wouldn't be a trio, cruple. I don't know. But the most played 4-man unit on the season is LeBron, AD, Reddish, and Reeves, and they're carrying a negative 14.4 net rating. The next highest used one is LeBron, AD, Rui, and Reeves. That one has played 51 minutes this season, and they're carrying a net rating of plus 2.8. So that's a little bit better, obviously quite a bit better than the Cam one. They need to find a small forward, a two-way small forward who would elevate that trio of LeBron, AD, and Austin. And Rui is really good, at least theoretically, on offense. Vando is really good, at least theoretically, on defense. But you need to combine those two guys and find yourself a two-way wing at the small forward spot who is athletic and also knocks down shots. And look, like those guys are really difficult to come by. So you're talking about a Cam Johnson in Brooklyn. We saw how much Mikal Bridges went for when he was traded to the Knicks. Like those players, those elite two-way wings, three little like legit 3 and D wings are really tough to come by. So whether or not the Lakers were able to do that, like whether they find that player out there, um, that remains to be seen. But that and as far as I've seen or heard, their top priority is solidifying the center situation where you need something a little bit better behind AD than Christian Coloco, Christian Wood, and Jackson Hayes. Like you need better options than that behind AD. But as far as the wing situation, like that's where they're really in need. So if they find that wing, and if they find that guy who can go out there and defend the other team's best perimeter player, and then also on the other end knock down open threes, that's when you'll see that trio really take off. And so far Rui has done the 3-part pretty well. I'm looking at his numbers on the season, not the last 5. But the On the season, Rui is shooting, man, only 42% from the field, but he is knocking down 50% of his threes. A not great volume, 3.6 threes attempted per game. Like, that needs to be better offensively. And the defense obviously is not making up for the amount that he needs to be better offensively. So, like, um, you know, if Wood and Vando come back, what's your 9-man rotation? So you have your starting five of it's probably going to be Austin, and I think eventually it'll be Max, and then it'll be Rui, and then it'll be LeBron and AD. That's your starting five. Dalton, well, I guess D'Lo would be your 6-man, and then Dalton would be 6A, 6B or whatever. And so that's 7 players. Then you got to find your backup big, and that's where you do the Joker thing, where you break a pool cue into 3 pieces and you throw those to the, 2 pieces, I guess. And you throw those to Christian Wood and Christian Coloco and Jackson Hayes, and you tell them to fight it out. Only one of you gets to survive and be the backup center there. And that's if they don't, solidify that group with a better backup over the course of the season. So whoever your backup center would be 8. And then you would have Vando or Rui, whoever isn't starting, being 9, not necessarily in order. That player would be a little higher on the higher in the rotation. And then, if they do condense the roster and they are somehow able to combine Rui and Vando into one really good wing, then that obviously would change some stuff too, and all that stuff. But that would be your 9-man rotation if everybody was healthy right now. And the biggest addition there would obviously be Vando. I'm not sure how much Wood is going to play if he ever does come back. So that needs to be pointed out too. All right. The next question here comes from Winston McCarthy, who writes, any chance of Olivari replacing Gabe in the lineup? I love him, ? I'm Ron Burgundy. Does Gabe and Olivari affect what Lakers are looking for? All right. So I don't see, so long as Gabe is on the roster, I don't necessarily see Olivari supplanting him. Gabe they're very, very different players. Gabe is a lot steadier and significantly better defensively than Olivari would be. All we have seen from Olivari so far is conceptual and theoretical. That said, I do think at some point this season, it would really behoove the Lakers to get a real look at Olivari before they go into his upcoming free agency and risk losing him after not really getting a real look at him, right? That's what happened with Jay Huff. That's what happened with Scottie Pippen Jr. So at some point this season, and this is something that I was talking to some people about, but like, I think one of the boxes that the Lakers need to check at the deadline is to make a couple imbalanced trades where they send out more players than they take in, so that you open up a roster spot for Olivari to be converted, or you open up some minutes with your guard group where Olivari will get a shot with your actual rotation. I'm not going to count like enough guys getting hurt that Olivari now gets a shot as a legit look, because then he's going into a compromised rotation. But at some point this year, the Lakers do need to give Olivari a real shot. And, if Gabe is included in a trade, or if D'Lo is included in a trade, or if both of them are somehow included in either a or separate trades, now all of a sudden the path for Olivari to get minutes makes a lot more sense. But as it stands right now, Olivari would have to, supplant Gabe, who, again, I don't see JJ supplanting because of what he does defensively. He would need to supplant maybe D'Lo. Maybe that role makes a little bit of sense for him. But D'Lo has been really good and really impactful the season in this new role that he's playing in. And so like that gets difficult to see. And then after that, you're talking about Dalton, Max, and Austin. He's not going to touch any of Austin's minutes. He shouldn't touch any of Dalton's minutes. And like maybe it's Max's minutes, but if Max ever gets his stuff together defensively, then he brings very different things than Olivari does. So I think you would need to see an imbalanced trade where, you know, Gabe is no longer on the roster or D'Lo is no longer on the roster, and then you'll see a shot for Olivari. But until then, you know, the path for Olivari doesn't quite it doesn't seem workable. But what he can keep doing for himself is keep on, you know, showing out in the G League, which he appears to be doing. He's been incredible down there the first couple games, and the longer he does that, JJ was asked about it. Was asked about Olivari before the Pelicans game, so you know people, you know, covering the Lakers are taking note. People around the league are taking note. And at the end of this season, here's what I will say. The Lakers can't get swooped on Olivari this year. Two-way contracts working away where like he is like the Lakers have exclusive rights to Olivari over the course of his two-way contract. Same goes for Koloko. But both of those guys have shown in Koloko's case, he looks like he belongs on an NBA court, which is great to see because he hasn't been on one since 2023. And at that time looked like he, you know, would probably consistently belong on an NBA court in some capacity. And then Olivari has, I think, proven to this point that he is overqualified to be in the G League. Whether he belongs on an NBA court, we'll see. I think he will show that eventually. But as it stands right now, to the extent that you can through a couple games and through preseason and summer league, Olivari has really shown that this dude is somebody that the Lakers need to, you know, keep real close, because at the end of the season, and I did some asking around, at the end of the season, teams have been paying attention to Olivari. And at the end of the season, teams are going to be ready to try to swoop in and when Olivari is a free agent, sign him to a vet min or a minimum contract that would take him away from the G League. At the end of the season, they'll be able to. And I think the Lakers have to have a little bit of urgency over the course of the year to give this guy a real shot so that when those offers start coming in, or when it comes time for the Lakers to make an offer themselves, and you know, sign him to an NBA deal, they'll be doing so with a decent enough sample size, you know, which is something that they screwed up with Scottie Pippen Jr. and Jay Huff, right? When it came time to make those decisions on those guys, the Lakers didn't have any kind of data to work with and would have been making those decisions completely blind. The Lakers have to avoid doing that this time around with Olivari. All right, let's dip into the Lakers Lounge Discord where, let's see, I'm going to go back. So this is funny. November 14th, what are you hearing about Max getting another chance? Well, he did, and he did a lot with it. You know, the first game, he looked a lot better offensively. The second game, he kind of struggled offensively, but got, frankly, made a game sealing play when he tipped out that offensive rebound, and the Lakers got the rebound and were able to knock down free throws from there on out. So I do think Max will be in the rotation in some capacity here moving forward. Let's see. 2 weeks with pay writes, great job covering the Lakers game on Friday. Any news on the Vando injury front? Did you see him warming up at all? I didn't see that from Vando. And like at this point, the fact that nobody is asking about it anymore is a little concerning. So, you know, we were told a couple weeks ago that like we're going to get a Vando update. And then the update was like, well, we'll get you another one in another week or so. and it was a really terse, like, no update on Vando when we finally got that update. So, like, at this point, you know, I'll I'll I don't want to report on injuries. Like, I understand what the need for information there, but those waters are so muddied by all of the vested interests in protecting that player from being seen as injury prone. And what that's led to is a complete lack of transparency that only pisses off fans with that player. But that's how these agencies want to handle it. That's how the Lakers want to handle that information. And they, to this point, like, they keep on saying that Vando's injury right now is his recovery from surgery, when, like, that's not an injury, and he has now missed, a decent chunk of the season in that recovery from surgery. And apparently Christian Wood suffered a bit of a setback too in his recovery from surgery. We don't know really what either player's surgery was there to address, but they're recovering from it. So I don't know. I told you guys a little while back that the smartest way to move forward here with the Vando updates, or your expectations for Vando, is to wait for him to get on the court and then analyze him when he gets out there. I just realized I've been on the air for 52 minutes now. So I did see one more starred comment that I'm going to answer, and then we got to get out of here because I'm going to do literally right after this. I'm going to hop on Basketball Passport with Lee Ellis. That is youtube.com/@basketballpassport if you guys want to tune into that conversation. But Matthew writes, the Lakers should try to trade for Turner. He blocks shots, shooting 40% from three. D'Lo and JHS works. Just have to decide on picks. Would you go for him? How many picks and swaps? I don't think the Lakers, frankly, have enough ammunition to trade for Miles Turner. I don't think he's really on the market at this point, from what I've heard, even though he's expiring. Indiana thinks that they'll be able to figure out a contract for him after this season. He is obviously a great fit for what the Lakers need. He should have been the trade target back when they were trading Russell Westbrook in the first place. Trading for him and Hield, I think, made more sense than the trade that they eventually made for D'Angelo Russell, Vando, and Beasley. I think of the three kind of options that were there, Turner and Hield, or the one that they made, D'Lo, Vando, and Beasley, or I think the other one was Conley, Vando, and Beasley. Or maybe just Vando. Of the three options, that Turner and Hield one, I think, was their best path forward. And I think now, with the benefit of hindsight, we can say that it probably definitively was their best path forward. But they didn't make that move. That, I think, though, the chances of acquiring Turner, like, things would have to go terribly for Indiana for them to consider trading Turner. And, I don't know that is realistically on the table, nor do I think it is wise of the Lakers to kind of pin their hopes on that outcome of their season, of Indiana's season, and wait for that for Miles Turner to maybe become available later. So yeah, I get why fans would want Turner. I also agree that he would be a borderline perfect addition. I just don't think he's a realistic option. All right. So that is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lowdown podcast. Shouts to everybody for all of your questions. Shouts to, I know I didn't get to some from Twitter or from Blue Sky. So what I think I can do is either save those and come back to them. The Lakers only played 2 games this week. So maybe I'll set aside an extra mailbag day to get to some of those questions, or I'll write something for the for my Substack, which I haven't touched in a while. It'll be a free post for you guys to read if you want, and you guys can I'll answer all of the questions in that piece. So until then, and until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a great rest of your day, make somebody else's, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Subscribe, rate, review, all of that stuff. Here's Avery.
Bye, everyone.